A raised pond can be a really stylish focal point for a garden, particularly a smaller garden. And according to the wildlife trusts, one of the best things you can do for wildlife is to have water, however small it is. But people think that raised ponds will need pumps and filters which need maintaining. They think they're going to have to clean it out. And it can sound like a lot of work. In fact, absolutely the opposite is true. It's Alexandra here from the Middle-Sized Garden YouTube channel and blog. And I've had a raised pond in my garden for 9 years and have never cleaned it out or maintained it once. And the water is clear and it's absolutely fine. So I know from experience that a wildlife pond, a raised wildlife pond, can be very low maintenance. I asked the wildlife trusts to tell me what we really do need to know and to bust a few of the myths around a raised pond. And so here I'm talking to Oliver Fry of the Surrey Wildlife Trusts to answer some of the questions we need to know. And also, I've been collecting pictures of raised ponds and images and films at the shows and at gardens I've visited. So this video has got lots and lots of different raised ponds in it to inspire you for your own garden. In terms of raised ponds, what's your view in terms of a wildlife perspective?
Well, first and foremost, I would say any pond is better than no pond. So if you're thinking about making a raised pond, or even something even smaller like a bucket pond or using an old washing up bowl or whatever, that's good. It's only going to be good news for wildlife. So we're all very happy to say, put in a raised pond. Obviously, the optimal pond for wildlife is probably not raised because animals need to get in and out. You maximize the chances of it being colonized by a wider range of species if it's at ground level. But you can overcome that with a raised pond by just making ramps or slopes or piles of logs or rocks around some of the raised areas to help animals get in and out. And that can also provide habitat in its own right. So with a bit of imagination, a raised pond can be a really great addition to any wildlife garden of whatever size in whatever location.
Taking that raised ponds are going to be smaller, is there an optimum size?
For wildlife, something like 6 foot across would be great. The bigger the better in all things pond.
Yeah.
But again, even if you have only got space for a teeny tiny pond, put it in because that's going to attract lots of things from dragonflies to frogs and toads to all kinds of the birds and beetles. Everything benefits from a pond. So 6 foot or more if you can. Don't be deterred if you can't make it that big.
What about the depth? Taking that, I mean, I know depth is quite important.
Yes, it is.
If we're going to have a pond that actually is deep enough for wildlife, I think there is a minimum, isn't there, in the deepest parts?
There is indeed. The best thing to do, if you can, make your pond 2 feet or more deep in the deepest part.
Yeah.
Again, as the usual caveat, if you can, don't worry, it's still going to be great. But 2 feet or more will be great because things that hibernate in the bottom of the mud, like frogs, benefit from being free of frost and freezing conditions. So all kinds of invertebrates and things will benefit from not being frozen solid. Nonetheless, winters are getting milder. I've got several little ponds, and even the shallow ones only get a thin layer of ice, and they attract tons of things too. So yeah, 2 foot maximum. Slope the sides if you can, and have areas that are, about 6 inches deep all around the sides, because those are the parts of the pond that will have the most wildlife in them. Birds can take baths in them. Hedgehogs can get in and out easily and have a little drink. Birds will eat lots of insects around the edges. The water's warmer if it's shallower as well. So 2 feet at the deepest point, lots of shallower areas too.
So that's going to be a slightly tricky thing to construct, isn't it? Because when you buy a raised pond, it's got either straight sides or curved sides.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. But there are ways around that.
Yeah.
You can either put some rocks in there, some dead wood, get lots of baskets with pond plants in, and make sure you've got a density of planting in the raised pond. So that provides an element of differentiation depth-wise. Maybe use some slabs, paving slabs that you prop up. So yeah, my sister's got a raised pond as happens, and that's full of native vegetation and little stones and little beaches all around the edges. And that does the same job as having a pond that's just naturally sloping.
So what is your advice on pond plants?
I've got a favourite pond plant that I find does really well, and that's hornwort, which is a native species. Grows really fast, oxygenates the water splendidly, provides lots of habitat for species, from beetles to newts and frogs and toads, etc., etc. Lily pads are really beautiful as well, and could suit even a reasonably small raised pond. They have beautiful flowers in the summertime. There's a plant called water hawthorn, which has beautiful little white flowers. There's another one called marsh marigold, which, as you might expect, has beautiful yellow flowers. Any garden centre will have a good range of plants. And also, if you're thinking about what plants to use, check out the Wildlife Trust's website, because there's tons of information on there. But the bottom line for plants is put plenty in, let them all thrive, and wildlife will come a-flocking in.
You can't overcrowd a raised pond, then it would be fine if it was very full of plants.
I'd say err on the side of putting more in than fewer, because the plants provide a really vital function in taking up nutrients from the water, which then prevents algae blooms. The bugbear of every pond owner is the water going green and slimy. That always happens in new ponds. But as plants establish in the pond, that becomes less and less of a problem as the pond matures. So yeah, err on the side of generosity when planting.
And in terms of care of the ponds, I'm seeing two lots of advice. One lot is sort of saying you've got to clean your pond out once a year or whatever, and the other lot saying, well, don't clean it out unless you really have to.
I go with the
Where do
latter.
you stand?
I'd say don't mess around with it too much. Remove dead vegetation in the autumn or early winter. But you don't need to do what people used to do when I was young and clean out the pond, drain it and refill it. That's really bad news. I would say keeping a pond clean means having lots of plants that filter the water naturally, siting it away from overhanging trees. In the autumn, obviously, you have huge leaf fall in any kind of well-planted garden. Those leaves fall into the water, turn it brown, turn it sludgy, boost the nutrient mix too much. So you're going to get more slime and a less attractive pond. So if you can site your pond in a sunnyish spot away from overhanging branches, that will save a lot of work on cleaning out. And then I would say just a gentle clean out, maybe in the autumn, and leave some of the vegetation that you've removed from the pond, the dead vegetation, around the side of the pond for a few days, so any creepy crawlies can just jump back into the water.
I've got a mini pond, which I did, I think now 10 years ago, and I have never cleaned it out. And it was absolutely fine. So
same here. I haven't cleaned mine out for ages.
So even just leave it, unless it's looking kind of sludgy or algae or something like that. You don't have to stick to some sort of calendar of cleaning at all.
Certainly not. No, keep an eye on the pond, and if it's obviously full of dead organic matter, then remove some of it. But you don't need a schedule. No, certainly not. That would probably do more harm than good. When the pond does get low, it's much better to top it up with rainwater that you might have collected in a water butt than with tap water. Tap water is not going to kill the pond, but it's much less beneficial than rainwater. And if you do use tap water, let it stand for a few days so the chlorine evaporates.
What about any best materials for building a raised pond?
Yeah, the best advice I can give there is don't scrimp and save on the liner. Buy a good liner and use an underliner as well. Any good garden centre or wildlife gardening outlet will give you advice on that. Because if you get a puncture in a pond, it's a pain in the neck to find it and fix it.
If you're buying something like a metal pond or even a terracotta one or something like that, will you also need a plastic liner as well?
Well, it depends. If that's a watertight pond, then no. But again, always check with the manufacturer to make sure that it's not going to react. Whatever you use isn't going to react with the water to cause pollution or kind of pH imbalances or whatever.
Presumably things like an agricultural drinking trough would be fine because obviously the water has to be clear for them.
Yeah, and they can make lovely ponds. Anything that's not going to compromise the water chemistry will be absolutely fine.
Do raised ponds need foundations? In other words, I think, should they have to sit on something hard and flat?
Always make sure anything that's solid has a flat and uneven surface. Absolutely, even if that means just putting some concrete down and putting some sand down. But I think generally speaking, a layer of sand would do the job. Anything, the same rules would apply for any construction project. A bit of care to make sure things are level, safe and free of anything that could damage the liner in any way or put it off kilter.
I think raised ponds are less or more expensive than digging a pond in the ground.
Oh, they're probably more expensive, aren't they? Because you have to buy the whole thing. With a pond in the ground, you can just buy a liner and an underliner and pretty much there. But I think you can get ones that are reasonably affordable.
Do raised ponds need a pump or filter?
Good question. It depends. If you've got fish, then generally yes. If you haven't got fish, then generally no. They don't do any harm as long as you make sure you've got some fine material over the inlet. Because if you've got what are predominantly a wildlife pond, lots of little invertebrates that obviously sustain life in the pond can get sucked into filter and die.
Okay.
So always make sure you're protecting the inlet by putting some mesh over it. Having said that, if your primary purpose is to attract wildlife, you probably won't need to bother with a pump or a filter. Let the plants do their work. They'll do the job of cleaning and recycling the water. It saves money to not have one.
What about mosquitoes?
Yes, I will fess up to the fact that my ponds attract lots of mosquitoes. Over time, as more predators arrive at the pond, dragonfly larvae, water beetles, frogs, toads, newts, etc., they become less of a problem. But what your question does relate very much to the previous question. In fact, if the surface of the water is moving, you're far less likely to suffer from a mosquito infestation. So a small pump that keeps the water circulating a bit on the surface is a great way of reducing mosquito risk. Otherwise, A, you're probably going to have to put up with a few mosquitoes and be patient while the pond finds its balance. B, remember that mosquitoes are excellent food for lots of wildlife, including bats as well. So if you can put up with a few mosquitoes, creation will thank you in the long term.
Oxygenating plants versus a fountain or a water feature.
Yeah, I'd always say prioritize plants over anything else. Plants do a wonderful job of filtering, providing habitat, adding structure, making the pond look a lot more appealing.
And is there anything else about raised ponds that you think we should know?
I'd just say, I'd stress that access and egress for any wildlife is absolutely vital. You can get all kinds of casualties in a raised pond if there's no way for animals to climb in and climb out safely.
Yeah.
That's easily done. I don't want to deter people from creating raised ponds at all, but do make the effort. Some logs or rocks to provide a nice sloping way of getting in and out can add to the look of the pond, provide additional habitat, and make the pond safer. Just having a pond with clean water and lots of plants is going to do a wonderful thing for wildlife, whatever the rest of your garden looks like, or whatever your kind of aesthetic preferences are. It's probably worth saying at this point that if your pond isn't full of newts, frogs, toads, and crystal clear water in your first year, or maybe in your second year, don't panic. It will find its balance as long as you've got plenty of plants in. It's a thing that will take time to mature and be at its best, just like people, really. But even within a few days of putting a pond in, you'll see lots of birds coming to bathe and drink. That's wonderful. It's a wonderful thing to see. It's an immediate reward for the effort of creating a pond.
If you'd like to find out how to make a raised pond, then don't miss this video coming up next about how to turn an agricultural trough into a container pond. And thank you for watching. Goodbye.